How's everyone doing? You guys having fun at Pensacon so far? Awesome. Well, my name is Derek Diamond. I also host my own podcast, The Derek Diamond Experience, which this is actually being recorded for. I've got an awesome group of panelists here today to talk about Stephen King's film and TV adaptations. Not the books, but the adaptations. So why don't you guys introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jason Robbins. I'm actually a co-host with Mr. Derek Diamond on the Nerd Cave Retro podcast. I also wrote a film called Monsters Anonymous that was filmed very close to here, and we actually showed it here a few years ago, but you can find it on Amazon Prime, and that's about it for me. I'm also a comedian, so hopefully I'll say something funny while I'm up here.
My name is Steve Wise. I'm the programming director for Pensacon. That's why I'm kind of all decked out like this. I'm also a filmmaker, and I have a film actually that Jason starred in that has been making its rounds. It's actually playing in Moscow, Russia tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Bill Gibson, and you may know my significant other, Christine. Ooh. She was here at the opening of Pensacon at one point. That nice 58 Plymouth car. So we officially tied the knot several years ago in Bangor, Maine. The cast flew out from Los Angeles, and the actual writer of the film, the script came off and married us together on Halloween weekend. I was dressed up as It the Clown. She always wanted to marry somebody, so the clown, she got one.
I'm Nathan Simmons. I'm a freelance writer, do comic book reviews for a couple different websites, write for a couple video game websites. I'm also a local actor and general Stephen King enthusiast.
I'm Nik Flagstar. I lead Nik Flagstar and his Dirty Mangy Dogs. We're a rock and roll band. We sing a lot of songs about horror movies, and I also host a radio show in Fort Walton Beach called Small Town Riots on 103.1 The Shark. It's a local music show, and I as well adore Stephen King and write songs about some of his books and some of the movie adaptations. So.
Fantastic. So before we get into the actual adaptations, you guys were all obviously introduced to Stephen King at some point. So how were you introduced to Stephen King's work? And what was your first Stephen King book that you read?
The actual first book I read, or because the thing is, I actually started seeing his movies first. Okay. I think the first movie I ever saw was Maximum Overdrive when I was a kid, and that really got me into the world of Stephen King because, of course, I don't know if anybody remembers the rumor when we were kids about how he got bitten by a bat and he got rabies, and that's how he came up with all these weird stories. And I'm like,
never heard that one.
Really? I was fascinated.
If you've never seen it, the trailer for Maximum Overdrive is the greatest thing of all time because it's literally him just like. There's almost no footage from the movie. It's just Stephen King being like, "You're not gonna believe what I've done this time."
Well, in the trailer, he actually said, "This is a moron movie."
Yes,
and he was right.
Yeah. Oh my God.
As far as adaptation-wise, because for me it was reading the book was Carrie, and then of course right afterward was Christine came in. I said, "Oh, geez," and it just so happened. At the time of the writing, while it was a #1 bestseller, Stephen had contacted Richard Kobritz, the producer, and the movie went right into play. And December 9th, 1983 came out, same time while it was on the list, and the passion was flamed right there at that point.
Actually, my first movie that I ever saw was Carrie, and that was the edited for television version because I was too young to watch the actual R-rated version.
Oh, I was waiting for it.
Another.
Do it again. For me, oh dang. For me it was. I read The Gunslinger when I was 14, because my dad was talking about this. He was describing this story to me, and I was like, I can't figure out. I can't wrap my head around what this story is. It's a fantasy. It's a western. It's sci-fi. And he goes, yes. And he's like, and also it's only like 220 pages. And I was like, I'm in. Let's do this. And then that started for maybe a year after that, I was constantly devouring Stephen King books. So it was The Gunslinger and then Salem's Lot was like what really hooked me after that. I was just like, I can't believe this is the same storyteller. Film-wise, the Shining TV miniseries
Directed by current Pensacon guest Mick Garris, who, by the way, has a movie screening tonight. Nightmare Cinema.
And that terrified me. There's some stuff in it that I think is so good because it's so much. It's really. Well, we'll get into it. Anyway, the Gunslinger was the one that really got me hooked.
I saw the Cujo movie first, and I saw it early enough that it was amazing to me when someone told me it was a book. They were like, "This is based on a book," and I was like, "Someone wrote a book about a monster dog? How do you read about this?"
And
so
that
I
person's
immediately
a millionaire?
Right, I immediately went to the used bookstore and found like a really tattered copy of Cujo that I still own, and that was where I really started. But The Shining Maximum Overdrive happened really soon after that,
Sure.
and then me and my friends got really obsessed by the It miniseries when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Love it or hate it, we were the right age for it, and it was about kids. And me and my friends, I think it happened maybe in a summer. I think it aired in a summer, so we were off school. So we went ghost hunting in the woods, It really changed everything for me.
It's interesting because, in doing research for this panel, there were so many Stephen King adaptations that I didn't know were bits of Stephen King's work. Because I grew up with The Shawshank Redemption. I remember watching The Green Mile. I had no idea those were adapted from Stephen King's books. So I was just blown away by it because those movies are great, and I haven't had a chance to read those books yet, but it got me interested in Stephen King's work, and the one that I always go to is 11/22/63. Fantastic book, and I actually thought the miniseries
I thought it was awesome.
with James Franco was very well done.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it had a really good cast. You had James Franco, you had Chris Cooper. Really, really well done series. And I remember watching it, because it's very rare for me that I watch a series multiple times, but that one I did because of how well it was done. But just kind of off the top of your head, what are some of your favorite Stephen King adaptations?
The Stand.
Yes,
Sure.
I love it. I remember I actually read the Green Mile because it came out serialized.
Yeah.
The different parts of the book, and I had read those, and then found out they were going to be making the movie for it. And of course, you know how it is when you're looking forward to Stephen King adaptations. They were never all that great, but that was really the one that actually looked and exactly like it played in my head when I read the books. And I just, The Green Mile is probably the absolute perfect adaptation of a Stephen King story into a movie.
I have a very personal connection to The Body, which was turned into Stand By Me. When I read the story, the novella, it really spoke to me because I shared a lot of experiences that were talked about. Not quite to that extent, but there was a lot of things that was I relate to the character of Gordy a lot. And a short time after I read the story, I heard that Rob Reiner was turning it into a movie, and I got very excited about it. And when it came out and I watched it, I was still a teenager at the time, and it touched me. It was just this is exactly what I went through reading the story. The movie captured that perfectly.
And it holds up too.
It does,
it's a timeless
absolutely.
movie.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Is this a trick question? My answer is going to be, yeah, she's watching.
What if he was trucks?
Actually, it's interesting. I'm good friends with Tim Shockey, who owns the Green Goblin Head, and we do a lot of conventions around the nation or whatever doing these. But yeah, Christine was definitely by far, I had no idea it would end up as it is today. Sure. But it was really good. The book got me and drew me to it, so I had to see the movie. And although they went totally different in a way, John Carpenter directed it, compared to the book, and having LeBay or the Ghost Post. And the whole reason he didn't want to do that was American Werewolf in London had just come out, and they had the rotted corpse there, and he said he didn't want to copy that being right out of the picture. So they didn't want to do the dead guy or, LeBay in the back seat. So they made the car alive. And to this day, I've had multiple conversations with John. He's still upset that he changed that from the adage. Whereas I felt, and a lot of people that I've talked to have felt having the car actually be alive was pretty cool. Who wouldn't want to own a car that, fixed itself and, watched your back and everything else mechanically alive?
I can't think of Christine without also thinking of the movie My Science Project. Because I had both of those movies on the same videotape, and I used to watch them all all the time.
That's a double feature.
So those two movies are like intertwined in my head.
For me, favorites fall into two different camps. One is quality and one is camp. You know what I mean? Like I love Misery. I love Christine. Shawshank Redemption is genuinely, I think, one of the best films ever made. Like, it's objectively a brilliant movie. But I also love, Nick and I were talking about, we love The Outliers. Like there's stuff like Graveyard Shift is just this bizarre little monster movie.
Yeah,
a lot of Brad Dourif fans
love
next door. Great. What was another one? Like, it's a terrible movie by most definitions. But Pet Sematary 2 is a lot of fun.
Sure.
There's some great stuff in it. There's some brilliant makeup effects, and Clancy Brown's performance is completely bonkers. If you ever want to see him go like full tilt insane, it's so much fun.
We talked to Miko Hughes on that, who was in the first Pet Sematary, and he says same thing.
Yeah.
But loved it because his phone is ringing for this.
Sure, and it swings for the fences. I mean, that's. Sometimes I appreciate something that takes really weird risks more so than one that's like slavishly devoted to it. But I think there's a case to be made for both, you know. So I don't know. I like good movies and I love terrible movies. Stick around for the defending bad movies panel.
Yes. I have two answers too, but I have two different categories. Mine are like Stephen King touching and Stephen King horror. And for me, it like you gotta think like, how bizarre is it that the same guy did Stand By Me and Pet Sematary? Yeah. Like, that's just strange all on its own. And those are my two, though, you know, like Stand By Me is one of the most classic movies ever. It's like Pantheon stuff. That's like way up there. And then Pet Sematary is one of those highly debatable whether it's good or not, and that's based on perspective of how you know the book and how you feel about the book and stuff. But just out of easy stuff, like Stephen King loves the Ramones, and he was like, I want to get the Ramones in a movie, and he did that, you know, and it was like really cool for a young punk rocker. And the shoe rolling out into the road is just like one of the most horrifying but hilarious moments in a movie. Like, it's so funny and stupid, but it's like a tiny child died. So those are my two, you know. It's like little kids being traumatized by a dead body, and then a little kid being smashed by a truck.
Sometimes dead is better.
My son is 7.
And the funny thing is, you mentioning Stand By Me, again, I had no clue that was a Stephen King adaptation as well, because it's so different than what you would think Stephen King is. But it's a great coming-of-age story, and it's a very, very good film. But
also, The Running Man is also a Stephen King.
That is,
Sci-fi, Stephen.
Yeah. Let's just say that they took the name and the general concept and wrote an original movie based on that, and said, well, we've got a Schwarzenegger film, so let's just make this as crazy and wild. A lot of people love The Running Man, the movie, but it is not what Stephen King wrote.
Sure.
I mean, he didn't write the line, here's Sub-Zero. Now, Plane Zero.
he had the split.
I would love to see them do an actual adaptation of the story.
It is
because
the
that story
bleakest.
Is just, it's horrible.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's pitch dark. I mean, yeah, absolutely. It would be a very unpleasant but awesome. Like, give that to Denis Villeneuve to do like a very depressing.
Well, of the Richard Bachman books, I mean, that one, it kind of is a different one, because most of the Bachman books are almost like, I mean, there's some science fiction in it, but they're just very
ugly.
I mean, it's like very gritty, almost crime drama type of stuff.
Yeah.
But this one is pure all out science fiction, and the ending they would probably have to change.
Science fiction.
Given the fact that it ends with him crashing a plane into a skyscraper.
It's the best.
Yeah, I don't think that would.
It seems like it's always, to me, it seems like it's always been easier for them to accurately portray a Stephen King book if it's a shorter, like thinner.
Yeah.
Right, Thinner may not be the greatest movie ever, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
And because the book is like this long and the movie's like this long, and they're just like, just tell the story. Just got a gypsy, just do the. And they nailed it, but like not a lot. There's not like a lot of people with thinner T-shirts on. It's not like a big fan favorite, but it's pretty accurate.
1408's the same way. They take
Yes.
it's a really, it's fantastic, and they take like the skeleton of the short story and build it out into this kind of mind trip. You know, I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's
His short story adaptations end up being pretty cool. Ride the Bullet and
usually,
stuff like
Ride
that.
the Bullet's fun. Yeah.
Right.
John Cusack did it. Awesome.
He was
Yeah,
so
he's
good
great.
in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he came right off of Road Racers, which was like almost the same character, except like in Ride the Bullet, he was like dead.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But it's like basically that same, like, just like greaser, like thug guy. Nailed
The
it.
only person I've ever talked to who's referenced Road Racers, and it makes me really
Rodriguez,
happy.
his first movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. I love it. I love it.
Does anyone have any questions or comments they want to throw out to these guys?
She does.
Sleepwalkers is a blast. That's my second camp of Stephen King movies.
Be careful not to criticize Mick too much.
Sure. No.
Since he is here today.
I would honestly say the issues with that movie have nothing to do with casting, directing. It's just it has maybe the most bonkers script. And it is one of those movies where I'm just like, I can't consistently with every scene. I can't believe people are saying the words they're saying. They're doing the things they're doing. And then also, I remember actually have the memory of watching that as a kid and thinking. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the makeup effects for the cat people are very similar. It's the furrowed brow and the giant like green eyes or whatever. And I remember flipping through channels and I thought I'd found an episode of Buffy I hadn't seen. And then a few scenes later, I was like, so what's this vampire doing with his mom? Guys, Sleepwalkers is a trip.
I always used to get Sleepwalkers mixed up with Cat's Eye.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. That and the Langoliers.
Right?
Nick said he was leaving if someone even mentioned the
Yeah,
Langoliers.
Langoliers was such a bust to
The
me.
Langoliers is not good.
It's just not good. Yeah, the effects are so bad. Really, is the worst.
Oh, you don't like the giant Pac-Man monsters at the end?
But the worst reveal, like, oh, why?
Wow.
Talking about Sleepwalkers, that actually doesn't count for this panel.
Right, it's not an adaptation.
Because it's not an adaptation. It's an original screenplay that Stephen King wrote.
Fair. Yeah.
That's true.
Well, that's why I asked
we gotta
about.
make it again. We gotta do it again.
Another one that no one ever really talks about, the dark half.
Yeah.
Remember, it kind of right, and the only problem I found with that was that it kind of like the money shot was so early with that awesome like reveal on the head thing that that everything else after that wasn't as scary. It was good, but it wasn't. It didn't get that really guttural
actually,
reaction later.
I had the computer game for the Dark Half, which was actually a lot better than the movie.
Is that Commodore 64?
No, it was. I had it for my Hewlett Packard back in like '94.
That's wild.
Oh.
Uh-oh. Oh, this
Scariest.
They're very
Let's hear it for scariness.
Salem's Lot.
I think honestly, for me, I think Pet Sematary is probably the absolute creepiest one. With the sister, is it the sister-in-law?
I had nightmares
that's
about
like-
Zelda for
Yeah, Zelda.
yes.
That's her name.
Absolutely.
I still, as an adult, can't watch that scene without.
Who was the actor that played the Zelda?
I don't remember his name, but it was a guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he only weighed like 105 pounds or
David
something
Bowie.
like that. It was
Extremely
weird.
creepy.
I think for me, kind of two answers. One, The Shining still, I can watch that and get creeped out. I mean, there's just something about the whole mood of that movie that just is very effective. Kubrick, even though he didn't go by King's story very closely, just used a very bare bones story for it, but he effectively created just a creepy movie. But as far as just pure scares, I have to go with the original Salem's Lot, and with the boy scratching at the window. That just
That's awful.
I would also add it's less scares and more of just a pervading mood. But Cronenberg's Dead Zone.
Oh yeah.
Is just it is so it feels like you're taking like a cold bath the whole time. You know what I mean? Like everything is just so uncomfortable and dire, and it's a very claustrophobic movie. Especially the sequences, when they're hunting the spoilers for a 40-year-old film, Frank Dodd, the serial killer. It is a very it feels hopeless at times, and that to me is almost more upsetting than something jumping out at me. I don't know.
We were talking earlier about there's a newish one if you haven't seen yet. That may not be one of the scariest, but there's one called In the Tall Grass that just came out not too long ago, and it is legitimately creepy the whole time. It's like one of those never resolves that just keeps digging you deeper in, and they also don't let you. They don't give you any third-party perspective. You are as out of the loop as the people in it. They don't know what's going on, and neither do you, and they give you no backstory. So the further they go along, it's just so hopeless that it becomes really scary, because you start to go like, is this movie just going to not have any sort of resolve at all? And it kind of doesn't. And it leaves you feeling bad.
Did you guys ever anybody see Gerald's Game on Netflix? And I think honestly now, ever since Chapter 1, I think we're finally entering into like a Stephen King kind of adaptation renaissance.
Like a get it right.
Yeah, like everybody's redoing everything, and they're finally getting it right. And
they're
that
getting
makes
it
me
right
excited.
on Netflix, which is why Gerald's Game in 1922 were like a perfect
but we
punch.
We won't talk about the Dark Tower. We'll just leave that.
No.
well, that wasn't really an adaptation, so we can't.
Also, totally original story.
Yeah, they'd have to have tried to do the books.
I'm sort of with the new It too. It Chapter 1 as really they're bringing it out.
Yeah,
As far as scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the new Its are very scary.
I'm probably in the minority, but I'll defend It Chapter 2. I like that movie.
I liked it too.
It's good.
In your camp.
There was a question.
Needful
Things. I read the book, and I actually never saw the movie adaptation of it.
It's good.
It's just one of those ones that just passed me by, and I don't know why. I never got around to watching.
The movie's good. Ed Harris is fantastic in it. A lot is sacrificed from a 800-page runtime, or page for. I think the movie runs. There's two different edits. There's one that's 100 minutes and one that's 75 minutes. It's severely whittled down. I think it's underrated. There's so much missing, and if you have read the book first, you feel like you've been cheated out of a lot of it. I feel like.
Nobody gets hurt in the movie, but actually there's a lot of fucking jump and
Yeah.
And it's just very, very tough, and you can see all this happening. There's some cool things where it's like the mother gets in this locked in the basement, and then she just starts screaming and happens, and finally there's nothing wrong with her, and it's just
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. There was in addition to the the kind of boom of adaptations, there's a lot of movies that just are indebted to his style. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It Follows has a very, it's very John Carpenter, but it also has kind of a very Stephen King vibe. There's Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. You're wearing the shirt. I was just gonna say it. Yeah.
Well, I've never, I was like, what is that? Yeah.
Any Castle Rock fans?
Yes.
Castle Rock.
Love it.
See my girl last episode 7? we had a blast. It took us 2 days to shoot that few minutes of scene. It took us like 2 full days that you see in there.
So what's the ride the bullet car? Is that her? Did you loan her out for that?
Mm-mm. Oh, that was a 59. That wasn't 58 Plymouth.
Okay.
That was a different thing.
So that
Storm of the Century.
Storm of the Century was written specifically for TV, I think.
I think so.
Is it TV? Yeah, it's been forever since I've seen it. I remember really liking it, really being unsettled by it, but I don't remember a ton of it. Yeah.
I will say Castle Rock was cool for Easter eggs, the first.
Yeah.
But what they're doing now with the Misery prequel, I think it is an absolutely awesome Misery prequel. It's. I was really surprised that it did that. I thought it was going to stay kind of vague, like just Stephen King world and new stories, but they just like really dug into like, you know what, this is a Misery prequel. Screw it, like, and they're nailing it. I think.
I talked to the producer when he was there on site, and they were allowed a lot more freedoms with this season. And he without giving me spoilers while I was there, he said, "Just wait." Of course, there will be a season 3. They're not to keep the things really.
The actress is just.
It's going to keep going for a while.
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
Oh, she did a phenomenal job.
Lizzie Kaplan?
Yes, Lizzie Kaplan.
Yeah, she's great.
Yep.
I noticed you mentioned The Dark Tower earlier. You're supposed to be working on a TV series, but do you ever think they'll eventually be able to get The Dark Tower right?
Well,
God,
the TV
man.
series actually has been canceled.
They canceled it again.
has.
Yeah,
It's been canceled
again.
before.
I know.
Honestly,
Don't be too upset. It's
I don't know how you would even attempt to do that.
I think you just go get. I think it should be done the same way Game of Thrones was done.
But the thing
And it's Stephen King, so it could even end terribly. Like, who cares?
I mean, but like you've got
It would
the
be true
character-
to the-
You got the character of Jake, who is 10 years old throughout the whole thing. So you're gonna have to
Sure.
get an actor that's
Right.
young, but somebody
That's a good
not
point.
gonna age that much over.
I wonder if Stephen King wrote that after a bunch of adaptations and went, I'm going to write something they can't adapt.
Yeah.
It's going to be a Western and a sci-fi.
Not only
and
that, you
horror.
have Stephen King himself in the story.
Right, he pops in. Yeah.
Okay, speaking of depressing endings, how about The Mist?
Oh, man.
That's one of the
I will defend
They
that
toned
ending
they
to
toned
the
it down
day
right in
I
the movie, and
die.
it was still awful. Like,
I love it.
The TV show was terrible. The movie is
Yes.
great.
yeah. Well, me and Nathan were talking about The Mist earlier as like how creepy it was, but if you've read The Dark Tower, it becomes less mysterious if you read The Dark Tower, because
It's opened up a lot,
he
yeah.
like just sort of spoils his own. He's like you remember The Mist? Here's all the stuff you didn't know.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna tell you about it as we run a train over the entire universe.
And that's the great thing about the Dark Tower series, is because it kind of interweaves everything he's
Everything.
ever done
Yeah.
around the concept of the Dark Tower.
Especially Hearts in Atlantis, which was one we haven't really brought up, which great performances in that movie too, like super mysterious and creepy.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Because even in It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, there are references to the stuff that happens in the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
And I would love to see an adaptation of it. I don't
know how it would work.
I don't know how you're going to do it.
Unless you are committing to, like you were saying, like committing to doing years of television. Or like when Ron Howard was doing it, he had a plan to do a film, then a TV series in the middle, and then another film. And I was like, that could work, and you can kind of get it all done in 1 year or whatever. But it's also hard to get someone to sign a contract to basically.
Exactly. Unless
yeah.
you film it like almost like Lord of the Rings, where
Right,
you
right.
get all your
Everyone's just
principal
living
actors
that
and
for a
everybody
while.
together, and you just record. You
know what? I'll
film
do it.
3 or 4 seasons.
Right, and I think
all in a row.
I think their big failure with the Dark Tower movie that they did is that they were like, well, since it's really hard to figure out how to do that, let's just do like
Our own story.
Here's what happens after the thing you already know. But like we're people that have read those books, they're not short, and we've read them all. So you're really dedicated to it. You want to see what you love turned into visual, and they just didn't do that. They just
85-minute action movie.
this didn't do that, and it's like, okay, I get your like rationalization for how you did this, but you didn't do the thing that we wanted to see.
Yeah.
Period.
Well,
Yeah.
and you get the feeling the director of the Dark Tower film he was very diplomatic in interviews, and I think he got to a point where he was like, if I don't do this movie, someone else is going to, and if this is the story they want me to tell, at least I can make some kind of stamp on this universe. And they nailed the casting. That's the thing that crushes me about that movie. Idris Elba's fantastic. Matthew McConaughey is scarier than he's ever been.
I love those two actors, but honestly, I would like to have seen those roles reversed.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Because Matthew McConaughey would also make the perfect Randall Flagg. So like that was, I thought he was so good in Dark Tower.
True.
Well, you guys are talking about the gunslinger. We've had that issue about how the actors, how we find somebody who can't age through the whole process. Computer graphics today are ridiculous.
That's true.
Yeah.
Just Irishman, that thing, man.
I would also just watch an animated series of the guy. I mean, seriously.
It's just enough to keep the right medium.
Yeah. That's a really good. Why all of us forgot cartoons existed.
And then also maybe we're just all thinking about it as one big story too. Like you could totally do like Wolves of the Cala as a movie on its own,
or The Gunslinger,
and not run the whole story. You could flashback enough stuff to tie it into those other books just for a standalone that isn't just totally made up. Like the dude wrote 8 books. Like then you had to write a 9th piece of literature to make a movie out of it.
Well, even the 4th book, Wizard and Glass, I mean, that's an entire, season worth of storytelling right there.
And then there's Wind in the Keyhole that he did later, which is a whole other story. That'd be a great movie too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Hold for applause. We did it.
So I haven't read it, but I've been really enjoying The Outsider on HBO.
Oh, yeah.
The Outsider so far is an excellent adaptation. And the thing is that, well, I love the book, but they capture the tone precisely and the characters. They treated the characters with respect. They weren't going cheese. They weren't going trying to make something outrageous. And, they like I said, the tone was just very creepy, very much serious, and I respect that. But it was really good filmmaking, good writing, good directing, good acting.
My bandmate just wanted me to just drop this in the mix, and that is Haven. So, what do you guys think about?
Not an adaptation.
I've never watched it. No,
You've never
it is
seen
an
it?
adaptation.
I mean,
actually.
it's.
But yeah.
Right. It's like Canadian X-Files.
Yeah.
It's really very lightly based on anything Stephen King, but it's like if X-Files happened in Canada where they have to be like really polite about the violence and stuff. That's what Haven is, really.
They apologized during the autopsy.
So sorry.
Sorry.
It's really entertaining.
I'm a big fan of the franchise.
Yeah.
But I love Tim Curry and I love that one. I read the book like last year. It scared the crap out of me.
Sure.
The new adaptation came out. It was more like the story, but the scare factor for me wasn't there. Like, it wasn't scary, but it was more like the book in my perspective. What do you guys think? Maybe we could just hash it together?
I think part 1 is really scary. I think part 2 has a beautiful emotional through line, and the scares aren't entirely there for me. Aside from, so the big moment from the trailer with the old lady like running into the room, it's done. Stop motion scares the hell out of me. And I don't know what it is. It doesn't look right. It's unnatural. Don't trust it. And there's something about that effect that feels kind of old school. Like it reminds me of like the stuff from Beetlejuice or something. There's something very unsettling. But there's an over-reliance on CGI in some places that kind of bother me. Yeah. But I think they're really good adaptations. They're both versions of it, the original TV miniseries and the new films. There's great things about both of them. The cast is just unbelievable in these new ones, though, to me.
The horror in it, to me, either movie and the book, it has much more to do with their inner struggles than the horror itself. Like the horror is like an extension of the things they're really scared of. So to me, I find it scariest when you put yourself in their childhood position.
And no one's listening to them.
Right, it makes me think of things that like made me cry and stuff when I was a child, and that's the stuff that makes it really scary, which is why I don't hate the miniseries, even though like a lot of people hate on it. I watched The Waltons, when I was a kid, so that was John Boy to me, and to see John Boy suffer was really like, me and my mom used to say like, not John Boy, when we went to bed at night as a joke, and so like that was really harsh to me to see that guy go through that abuse and
say
stuff.
beep beep Richie when you go to bed.
Beep beep Richie.
Even a lot of the written, and this goes not only to it, but a lot of his other representations, when you read that book and you can't put it down, and the feeling, because it draws you in as a character, there's always something about that is a big difference.
Sure.
Well, okay, talking about it, they liked it. The book is so dense and has so much complexity to it, even though it's kind of structured in a really unique way, that both the miniseries and the new set of films did the same thing. Instead of going back and forth between the two timelines, they set one part in the past and one part in the present, which makes a whole lot of sense. But the problem with the miniseries was it was made in the 90s for television. And so they had to keep things to standards and practices of ABC, which watered down
a lot.
Oh, and I mean the opening scene with the little girl and where Pennywise was seen through the sheets, which was not in the book.
Yeah.
That was creepy, and they were effective in making kind of daylight and balloons scary.
It has a weird, almost dreamlike, surreal quality
it does.
to it.
Yeah. In both adaptations, the best parts were with the kids. And then when you go into the parts with the adults, it falls apart.
It's Harry from Night Court's here.
Right. Well, I think that's something that's
well, and that was part of the problem with the miniseries is that ABC pulled from its sitcom actors to put into a horror film. And so you had Harry Anderson and John Ritter and people like that. Tim Reed
and Ed O'Toole.
And and it was just like, okay, this is kind of odd to see these sitcom actors being in a horror movie.
Sure.
They were great for the characters.
Yeah.
But it just didn't have the same effect as when you're watching little kids dealing with the scares. And the new movies suffered from the same thing, but had other sets of problems.
I think all Stephen King adaptations suffer from one thing, and this is why it's an issue we would even talk about, is Stephen King is notoriously long-winded in his characterizations. Right. He spends tons of time turning these characters into really real and really detailed things. So what's scary about his books is you've gotten to know this person as a human. You've created a human being. So it's not just a character getting slaughtered in a movie. It's like a character who their kids' names and what illness they had and all this stuff. Yeah. And you just can't fit all that into 2 hours. And a 3-hour horror movie is long for a horror movie. So it's a catch-22. It's like to make it really right, you got to do The Shining and kind of change it so that it makes 3 hours worth of like weirdo watchable stuff. At the same time, you're going to lose a lot of what Stephen King wrote to make it really great.
And kind of building on that too, Stephen King writes his characters to where they feel realistic because a lot of the dialogue is kind of goofy, and people speak that way. It's kind of goofy. Yeah. But when you have an actor say those lines, it sounds wrong. And
laws, yeah. Oh, laws, yeah. Like, dude, just come up with something that sounds human and say that instead of the words he wrote. Like, don't pronounce it that way. Yeah.
Well, it's like Insomniac. I don't know if you guys ever read Insomniac. That is such a long book, but the character is so compelling. And this guy you're following, this whole story is what keeps you in it. Because there were so many times I just put the book down. I was like, I'm never gonna finish this book, but I couldn't stop.
I don't want to though.
That one feels like reading a fever dream.
And if you have insomnia, that's a great book to read.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've not seen the adaptation yet, and didn't even realize it was one until very recently. But I was curious your point of view on Cycle of the Werewolf.
Oh, Silver Bullet.
Silver Bullet.
Yeah.
That's another one.
I love that movie.
In my camp sector, I think it's so fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Busey, man. I mean,
Busey, baby.
He's so good in that, and the kid is so good. Their relationship is so good. It reminded me of My Crazy Uncle, and like for the people it was made for like early teens boys. It's like his wheelchair's a freaking motorcycle. This is rad. Like it does what it's supposed
I
to
actually
do.
turned out to be that crazy uncle, so I really identify with that movie.
And let's not forget that Gary Busey was in that film, and his son is here at Pensacon. Jake Busey is a guest, so go check out Jake Busey's at his table.
Plug.
Tommy Knockers.
Tommy Knockers.
Oh.
I'm gonna
Let me feel this one. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Tommy Knockers is my least favorite Stephen King book.
Sure.
There are a couple of them right during that time period that he wrote that he was like completely drugged out, and they just don't work.
So was the Dreamcatcher. It was in that era.
Yeah, and I felt like there's another ABC miniseries that actually benefited from being an ABC miniseries because it was just the story could be spread out, and the actors I felt brought these characters that I did not like in the book.
Yeah.
They brought him to life. I mean, Jimmy Smits was not who I pictured in the book.
He's great in that,
but
though.
he's
Yeah,
really
he is.
good, and it just. The ending of the miniseries was not great, but I enjoyed watching the miniseries because I felt like it was not a good book, and they improved upon it.
Dr. Sleep.
I loved it.
Dr. Sleep is fantastic.
I thought it was incredible.
Yeah.
Which features Carl Stryken, who happens to be a Pensacon guest.
I still haven't seen Dr. Sleep yet.
I've seen Nick cry over a lot of Stephen King content.
Cool.
Whether it be out of fear or emotion. So I was wondering what, if any, Stephen King moments have made each of you cry. I have one too, but I'd be more interested in y'all.
The final scenes of Stand By Me crush me every time. I mean, that movie is just full of wonderful moments like that. Yeah. Oh, and spoilers for It chapter. Well, no, I'm not going to spoil it. There is a moment where someone is carving initials on a bridge, and I openly wept in the theater.
That movie actually brought tears to my eyes twice.
Yeah, for sure.
When John Coffey says he's tired
my God.
people being ugly to each other, I'm just like,
I just got
don't do this.
I got chills with you saying it. Like, can we all cry together?
I melted in the movie theater. Like I almost left the theater because I couldn't handle it. Because it hit me in the book, but when seeing it in real life with what was his name that played John Coffey?
Michael Clark Duncan.
Michael Clark Duncan.
Unbelievable.
Was born to play that part
Absolutely.
of John Coffey.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question.
What did you guys think of Dr. Sleep?
Super fun. I'm really looking forward to they're going to do like a director's cut, I think, or has he already done one? I don't know.
I don't know. I actually have the DVD in my car right now that is about a week overdue to Redbox because I rented it to prepare for this panel, and I ran out of time to finish watching it because I was prepreparing for Pensacon. So
I got
hopefully when I get back, I'll finish
I
watching
got in a
it.
pretty heated debate with a good friend over it. Julio Diaz of Pensacon fame. He didn't like. So without really a spoiler, at a certain point in the movie, it shifts into being very much in the universe of The Shining. Before that, it's Danny as an adult, and then so it's kind of a new story thing, and then it shifts into being in that universe, right? He didn't like that. He was like, "Oh, like I've already seen The Shining," and I was like, "But like it's a sequel,
more Shining.
right?" So I think it tricked his brain. Like he was so into this new universe that he was kind of disappointed that it went back to something he already knew. But I thought they nailed going back. I thought that the actors, like the actors that they made to replace them just really nailed it. Like
How great was Carl Lumley?
oh my gosh,
Wonderful.
you know.
And if you guys haven't seen it, the movie Ready Player One, it's not a great movie, but it has this great recreation of the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
And you just, it's hard to explain. You just have to see the movie. So it's worth watching it just for that.
But it's appropriately.
Christine's even racing in that if you see her.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't never
You see
notice
that? See,
that.
Christine's in that too.
It's appropriately creepy.
wow.
Yeah.
It's got enough of the Kubrick vibe. Nobody can. You couldn't do Kubrick. That's not a thing you could do. You couldn't like think of all the tin cans that have some like obscure brand on them from the 1930s that make some point that he would make.
Sure.
But you can like kind of go with his vibe, and that was a good melding of like Stephen King's real story that he just wrote, and then Kubrick's sort of vibe that everybody knows The Shining as. So it was good.
Fantastic. Well, we are officially out of time, so let's give these guys a nice round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.